Dr. Kelly, this is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah.
We always like having you here.
Thank you. I enjoy being here.
Well, good. Well, guess what we have for you today?
No, I don't know.
Gardening terms, right? So you're so good at that. All right, so let's start with our first gardening term. And again, these are terms that we throw around all the time, right?
Right, yeah.
So we want to make sure people know what they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first term is ornamental.
Ornamentals, yeah, that can mean a lot of things, but in our gardening industry and in the gardening world, that refers to plants that are used for decorative purposes in landscapes and around buildings and yards. It can be specimens, it can be even cut flowers, you know, things, or house plants even. When you encompass the whole word ornamentals, you know, that's what we talk about. But now in the industry, you know, the guys that grow the plants, you know, the ornamentals to them are more the woodies, like shrubs, trees, you know, those kind of things. But it can refer to perennials as well, the herbaceous, you know, so that's just depending on who you're talking to. But it's decorative plants that are used in our landscapes.
Okay. All right, our next term is soilless mix. We hear that term a lot, right?
Yeah, we do. We really do. And we throw that around a lot, but then you know what's even a misnomer more is people go and they'll say, well, I'm going to go buy some potting soil. Well, you know, most of what they're buying nowadays is not soil. You know, it doesn't have any field soil in it. It's things like peat and perlite and vermiculite, maybe even some sand or bark. You know, so it's not soil, it's, you know, from the garden you dig up, and it's not like that. So soilless mix are things, mixes, commercial mixes that we buy for our pots and things like that that contains no soil. No. You know, sometimes they'll have a fertilizer charge in them, you know, for a while, and they're really great because they've got all of the properties you want in a good soil.
All right, so that's soilless mix.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next gardening term, sucker.
Yeah, well. P.T. Barnum said there's one born every minute, right? Isn't that what he said? But that's not what we're talking about. A sucker, as a horticultural or gardening term, refers to a shoot that arises from the base of a usually a shrub or a tree that we really don't want in most cases. You know, we usually remove it. For example, some of our crepe myrtle cultivars want a sucker and shoot up all these little shoots from the base, when what we want is to make more of a tree form, you know, with our tree form crepe myrtles. So we usually just cut those off. And they can also arise not from the base of a plant, but also from roots, from adventitious buds. Think about mimosa. You know how if you have a mimosa tree and then it'll start shooting up everywhere across the yard, you know, those are suckers theoretically too, because they're coming off of a root from that parent tree.
That's a good example. Okay. All right. Side dress is our next term. And of course, we hear that all the time in vegetable gardening.
Yeah. And that's a term to describe a type of fertilization. Okay. You know, how you do that. You know, we can broadcast, just get out there and just throw it every which way. That's called broadcast. And then we have a side dress. And there's other terms as well for other types, but we're going to talk about side dress. And that's usually in vegetable gardening. And you do that at a certain stage of growth when the plant is needing another big boost of fertilizer, and particularly nitrogen, to help them keep growing through the growing season. And to side dress, you just open a trench right beside the row, away from where the seeds are, but close. You know, you don't want to burn the roots. And you just pull a trench and then just put your fertilizer there. Hence, side dress. Yeah, right. And some of the other crops that we side dress are typically the vining crops, vegetable vining crops like cucumbers, some of the squash that we have that vine, watermelons, cantaloupes. And we usually do that when they just begin to what we call run, you know, when they start vining. Yeah.
I think even Mr. D liked that one. He's nodding his head. It's pretty good. All right, here's our next gardening term, damping off.
Yeah, that's a real descriptive term. And it refers to a condition or a disease that happens. It's can be different kinds of pathogens that cause this, and it's when the conditions are wet and cool. Happens in germination beds with young seedlings usually, and just to prevent that, which is very common, it's a very common problem that happens when we try to grow seedlings, like particularly now You want to grow something on the windowsill, you know, it's still cool and kind of damp there by the window or whatever. So you get little old seedlings that just flop over. They die, the stem will die at the soil level and they just flop over, you know, damping off. They fall off or fall over. But you can prevent that by not putting them in cool and wet conditions if you've got a little germination tray or something. Or using a sterile mix, like go buy one of those soilless mixes. Don't get it out of your yard, which could be full of those kind of pathogens. So that's a good way to prevent it too. Always start with fresh mix for your germination beds.
And usually cool, wet weather.
It's what makes it worse, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Okay. Our next gardening term is loam.
Yeah, loam or loamy soil, yeah. That describes a type of soil that we really want in our gardens. And it can be, you know, you can tell people, that you'll ask, what kind of soil I got? Oh, I got a loam, you know, and they're like, you know, well, dang, I got clay. Yeah, I got clay, you know.
It's like gumbo to me.
Yeah, so loam is the type of good, friable soil that farmers love. You know, it's usually found like in bottomland naturally, you know, where
Memphis
stuff.
silt loam.
Yeah, and it can be and it can be a combination of silt and humus and a little bit of sand, you know, so it's a nice and a little bit of clay, just the right little amount of clay to make it, you know, have the right water retention plus good drainage, you know, so it's the type of soil that we kind of want.
Yeah.
And it does occur naturally in some places,
It does.
you know, and it's high in vegetable matter, you know, decayed vegetable matter.
Right.
So it has a little more organic or humus content too. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's what a lot of people want.
Yeah,
Loam.
good garden soil is
garden
usually
soil.
called loam.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next gardening term, inflorescence.
Yeah.
And you actually have examples of that, right?
Yeah, you kind of alluded to that as something maybe bad. No, it's not bad.
Do you have it in your garden? Or what?
Yeah, you want it in your garden. If
All
you want flowers, you know, yeah, you got inflorescence. And that's a term that means the entire flower structure, which could be the flowers, the bracts, the little stems, you know, and the branches that encompass the whole floral part of the plant. And for example, there's all kinds of terms to describe different kinds of inflorescence. And people would be very familiar with the single flower, like a hibiscus.
Right.
That's called a single inflorescence. You've just got the big flower and that's it. But now, for example, there's other types this one that I brought is called an umbel. And it's a type of inflorescence that is a grouping of flowers. And if you can see, these little individual dudes right here are actual flowers. Each of these little things are flowers, little trumpet flowers. But they're on a structure that they're all connected together, you see? And that's called an umbel. So it's a grouping of, you know, different inflorescence together. And another example of an umbel that people might be familiar with is the Queen Anne's lace. You know, everybody knows Queen Anne's lace. That's an umbel inflorescence. And then we have another one called, there's all kinds. There's one called a raceme, which would be the arrangement of flowers that are really close to the stem, like a foxglove. Okay. You know that. So but that's the term for the entire flower structure, including, you know, the different parts.
Okay. Inflorescence.
Yeah, you want that in your garden.
Yeah, we want that.
Yeah.
All right, that's good stuff. All right, here's our next one. We want this in the garden too. Node.
Node, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I remember when I was taking botany, we had nodes and internodes.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah. So I got an example of that I want to show you too. This is and I didn't tell y'all what this was.
Oh yeah,
but
please do.
Yeah, that's an Edgeworthia.
Okay.
And it's very, very fragrant. It's called Chinese paper bush.
Okay.
And of course it's blooming now, obviously. So, you know, it's a great plant to have in the early spring garden because it blooms before it flowers.
And it smells good.
It blooms before it flowers.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That was smart. Yeah, anyway, back up. It flowers before it leaves out.
Right.
Does it need full sun? Or is it
No, it gets a little shade at my house.
Okay.
So I believe, though, it could grow pretty much in full sun, maybe a little afternoon shade. But get back to the node issue. Right here, this is a bay leaf. You know, the plant that's the herb, that's the bay leaf we buy in the grocery store. But a node is a little bit of a bump on the stem. See the little bumps? Those are called nodes, and it's the place where they're buds, and the buds can be a leaf bud or they can be a flower bud. So it's the little bump on the stem where leaves or flowers arise. And so it's a bump here, bump here, bump. And dormant, when they're dormant, you know, trees right now, you can really see, you know, all the little nodes. So it's the place where the buds are, and they can be flower buds or leaf buds.
It shows up really good on corn plant.
Oh, yeah?
Or bamboo.
Oh, yeah, certainly, yeah, on bamboo for sure, yeah.
Okay. Thank you much, Dr. Kelly. We appreciate that.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please click the subscribe button below.